Come on. You can see and hear me. A weak stable. You can see and hear me. A weak stable network there. So we out there. I think we'll walk down a bit because it doesn't appear that there is a great connection at this point. Which was the chat. Ah, here we are. Ah! You suddenly all kind of come through. So you're in and out, then in and out. So let's stand here. Let's hope that catches up. This is a 27 tomorrow here in Sweden. What's the temperature in York? In York today, it's about 23, 24, maybe somewhere around that. So hopefully, hi Michelle, hello Lethargy. Can you just tell me if I'm sort of stable now, because the signal bit has gone down. So I'm getting messages through. Almost on the screen at once. You did it. It was like I felt like you'd been sort of dashed in, like you kicked the door in, and suddenly you all kind of arrived en masse. You caught me a little bit surprised. I thought I was on my own. Well, not on my own, as you can see. I am in company today. That's lovely, sunny here in Robin Hood's Bay. So without further ado, I'm assuming that you can see and hear me. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a gentle wander down to the seashore. I will admit that on this tour there probably might be little outages on the signal. What I'm going to do is when I come back I'll do a bit of filming, and if needs be I'll just drop it in, so by the time the video you watch it back later, I'll have put bits in that I missed. So do stick with us, but if there are just one or two dead spots, don't worry, we're moving on. So I was planning to start over here. Let me just turn around the screen so we can just see, but it appeared there's a bit of a dead spot there, which is a shame. If I can just get a little signal there, there's a lovely old fantastic, all stable, so the horses. It's a lovely old black and white signpost there saying North Riding County Council up at the top, pointing up to Whitby. So for a kind of way marker, we're sort of 5 miles or so away from Whitby, obviously on the North Yorkshire coast. So we're very. So this is Station Road, isn't it? I think. Yeah. So we've got Hawker and Whitby pointing in that direction, and we've got the Cinder track route pointing down towards. So we're going to be following. So the Cinder track is actually where. So we are going to be walking our way down into the bottom of the village, really. Hello there. And up at the top is kind of characterised by these really kind of pretty fabulous buildings, many insofar as those with the money, those that owned the companies, those with obviously access to the means, didn't actually want to live down at the bottom of the town. Where they wanted to be was actually up here. So we've kind of got a very much now a kind of an absolute inversion of that. As I kind of go down into the village and you see the kind of the super cute cottages, that's where you'd want to stay. And many of them, of course, are kind of holiday lets. But in years gone by, if you had the money, you didn't live down in the bottom on the slopes, in and amongst the kind of the rabble, you know, and the poverty and the smells of the kind of gutting of fish and so forth. You'd have been up here. So this is where the money was, you know, right up at the top. So those of the means and the wealth didn't live down in the town. But as I say, ironically, our tastes have completely kind of flipped 180 now, and everybody wants a kind of piece of the fishermen's cottages. But as so often we kind of talk about, you know, on these tours, hello MB, not seen you for a while, I think, you never sort of get too sort of misty-eyed about how beautiful some of the accommodation is, particularly the small cottages, because it really just was very, very kind of poor quality life for people, for sort of hard-working sort of fisher folks and their kind of families. But they are beautifully cute, and so, you know, we can indulge in the cuteness, but never quite forget that behind it was kind of lives of relentless and grinding poverty. So good news, says Judy, I completed the virtual London challenge last Wednesday night. Oh, fantastic. Ron Lynn's with us as well. So I say, for those that have just recently dropped in, my apologies, there might be some signal fluctuation on this place. It's the nature of kind of where we are. We're kind of walking down kind of steep valley. It's worth it for the bits, and I know when we get to the bottom, when we get in the bay, the signal's usually really, really good. So do stick with it, and hopefully, you know, it will be worth your endeavours, but a bit of buffering, I'm afraid, is the kind of price that we're all going to have to pay. So isn't that beautiful? Look at that. The quality of accommodation, the beautiful kind of stonework. It really is an incredibly handsome villa. So, you know, we've got sort of traditional, you know, Georgian stonework over on this side, and Victorian kind of grandeur over on this side. It's a beautiful weather, beautiful sky, everything is kind of set well. So, welcome to kind of Robin Hood's Bay. We're sort of set within the beautiful scenery of the North Yorkshire Moors National Park. I say Whitby, about 5 miles in one direction, Scarborough, I think about 14 miles in the other. So we're kind of set in between the two. And I'm so glad you're here as well, Linda. So we're kind of nestled in the North Yorkshire coast. So we've got these two larger tourist destinations. You've got Whitby above us, Scarborough below us. But this is, don't be fooled, this is a very, very popular tourism spot itself. But Whitby and Scarborough, of course, are, you know, the larger, certainly, of the two. In terms of its origins, it seems that there is, well, I mean, some of you may be aware, at Scarborough, we've got the kind of the oldest, you know, historic settlements in the country. We've got Starcar. Is a settlement, I think, about 11,500 years old, somewhere in that kind of region. And bear in mind that unlike a lot of southern Europe, there weren't people living here 50,000 years ago because it was simply too cold. You know, the Ice Age meant that this was under kind of permafrost. So, you know, it wasn't really until the Great Thaw comes, between about, so around about sort of 10, 12,000 years ago, that you start to see settlement in this kind of far north in terms of kind of lines of latitude. Is it like, did I get that right? Is it latitude, isn't it, north? Yeah, so we're about sort of 54, maybe north here. So this would have been frozen wastelands for sort of 30,000 years through the Ice Age. So what we have got though is Starcar up at Scarborough, which is kind of recognised as kind of being the oldest settlement, I think, certainly in this part of the world. So that gives you a sense there certainly would have been people living here, you know, in and around this area, within a few miles of here, if not precisely here, you know, 10,000 years ago. But obviously, in terms of our understanding of this area, it's obviously, we start to see the sea now, so coming into view, got a lovely view across the bay, and the sea's going out, which is lovely, so by the time we get to the bottom, we can have little rock pools, see what we can see, so we can find starfish and some lovely things. So hi Sarah Painter, hi, there's Alan said, hello to Michelle. Thank you Valerie, I saw your message earlier, thank you very much for that, Valerie Peacock, in case you're on, that's lovely. Ice cream for dogs, yeah. Even dogs get to enjoy themselves here, Royders Bay. So we're in the ancient parish of Fylingdales. So that's spelled Fyling, Fylingdales. And we believe that the name Fylingdales, or we believe, I've been told, I've read, as you might say, it comes from an English word, Fygella, which means marshy ground. So it does suggest that this area was characterised by marshy grounds, wet grounds. And as you can see, if I just pan across here, you can still, it's sort of still semi-rural, you know, quite developed compared to a lot of the Yorkshire Moors, which is incredibly barren, you can't plant on it at all, there's only sheep. Whereas here, there are signs of kind of arable farming, but obviously marshy ground, chances are kind of drainage challenges and so forth. So it's not a brilliantly abundant environment, but compared to sort of 5 miles or so from here, where you're right on top of the moors, it's incredibly green, isn't it? You know, it's when you're looking at this, you're sort of seeing, by and large, greenery. 5-10 miles from here, it's the exact opposite. It's gorse, it's heather, it's very, very kind of barren indeed. So chances are you can get older communities here because it offers opportunities to farm. And of course, this is what defines patterns of settlements in history, where there's a source of water, where you can farm, where there's shelter, you know, where you can defend and so forth. So high up, you can farm here. does suggest to me access to water, that it's very, very likely that this would have been the site for Iron Age settlements. It certainly would be in common with much of the rest of Yorkshire in that respect. But the first evidence we've got here is Bronze Age. It's about 3,000 years ago. And what they've found is burial grounds. And so often, you know, in terms, obviously, this is no written evidence, obviously. What we're kind of talking about here is obviously things dug up the ground. So this is the evidence of archaeology, as you might say. But there's burial mounds and evidence of people here for about 3,000 years ago, up on the moorland above the village. So as I'm kind of panning across here, if you're looking at that kind of green cliffside going above the high ground, that's where there's evidence of settlement in the Bronze Age. And then there's the Robin Hood butts. So we'll talk about the Roman in a minute. So for those that have come and visited, this is the sort of famous car park at the top. And from here on in is all downhill, as they say. Of course, what that does mean is after you've visited Robin Hood's Bay, you've got to come back uphill. So the kicker, it really could do to be sort of going the other way, couldn't it? And kind of park at the bottom and walk up. But it's not that, so it teases you, I'm afraid. And instead, you get the easy bit first up. And then you get a punishing schedule walking back up. But we'll not be chatting to you on the way back up. So thankfully, you'll not hear me huffing and puffing and getting horribly defibrillated here. Got oxygen on the way. So yeah, it's going to be a lovely show. But let's start. I think we'll just go through this gate first. I'll give you a nice view. So we've kind of got the less developed side. You've got the harbour is in front of us. The classic kind of harbour town is the classic, you know, what everyone thinks of as Robin Hood's Bay. These beautiful kind of higgledy-piggledy roofs, and we're going to sort of walk in and amongst those and just fall in love all over again. But on this side, you've got what they call the rocky foreshore. So this is the kind of the much less sort of developed sort of side of things, as you might say. Great for fossil hunting. Those are into digging around and kind of looking for kind of fossils and sort of going back from the Jurassic era and heaven knows how far back. There's kind of fantastically rich kind of collecting ground down there. So that's what's called the rocky foreshore. So we're looking out across to sea. Isn't it beautiful? It's a bit of a sea fret today. We came in via Whitby side and you could barely see Whitby Abbey coming over, so it really was just hanging above the cliff head. Hello, Elizabeth. So I'm just going to come down a couple of steps down here, and it is a bit foggy. We're going to call it a sea fret. I think we'll try and. Isn't it just lovely? So you can sort of see that what we've got obviously is a very natural valley and harbour, and of course this, as ever, is kind of what again defines both human settlement, but also places to land boats, places of communication, places of fishing, and so forth. So the history of human geography is based on utilisation, isn't it? Of the assets. So a natural sheltered harbour point like this is always going to be of appeal, and of course it also made it brilliant for smuggling, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So it is absolutely gorgeous, Ronnie, and you're going to love it. And as I say, unfortunately, we'll get a few bits of signal wobble, but don't worry, we're going to do our best. We're going to go slow, pick it all up, and then if there's anything I miss, I'll do some filming on the way back up, and I'll drop it into the video so that we're, and David's on as well. So David, always nice and a pleasure to have you on. So how relaxing and restful is it to be by the sea? It's my first visit to the sea in 2024, Mrs. John's as well. So you just want to soak it up, don't you? Something calming, balming. I'll show up with the birds. Can you hear the sea? It's very faint, 'cause it's quite a long way out. But pirates, you hold that thought at it, girl. Pirates, smugglers, you name it. It's a dark, dark place, Robin Hood's Bay. So, beautiful. Look at that. That's gorgeous. That could be in the Mediterranean, couldn't we? It's absolutely delightful. So, hello, Penny. Not a place for dogs, this, Penny. It's a bit steep for them. So we've got evidence of, as I say, the Iron Age and the Bronze Age settlement here. We also know that a lot of Roman activity in this area. A place called Ravenscar. In fact, if you remember this time last year, I think it's about this time last year, we tried to come down here and couldn't get here. The road was closed. The police turned us back. So we went down to Ravenscar instead by the sea. It was an absolutely delightful tour. I was surprised, but it was a delightful tour. Well, there's a Roman signal tower there, So signal towers basically, is where they build a tower and built a light fire, so they could like a rapid kind of alert system, so you quickly send a signal for invasion. Well, they had one of those at Ravenscar, so we know that there was definitely Roman settlements in this area. But in terms of what we might call the modern sort of settlement, the beginnings of a meaningful village here, we're into the kind of Anglo-Saxon era, followed by the Vikings. So this is the Norsemen. Very much found this to their tastes. Of course, being seagoing people, they'd explore the coastline thoroughly to look for places that suited them, and they very much decided that this was a place for them. And again, probably attracted, you see, to their farming ability, rich glacial soil, ample fish, and farming and fishing sort of blended together is, kind of what can sort of sustain a community. So I'll give you another view of the kind of foreshore here. So again, you can see, because we are increasing, the tide is going out. The high tide is in about an hour, I think. So the sea is going out, and a great deal now of this foreshore, this rocky foreshore, which I say is great for exploring, a lot of fun. And so we think that the original Norseman settlement was a place called Raw, which is a hamlet slightly inland from here. And the reason for this, somebody mentioned pirates a minute ago, is it didn't actually do to be right on the coast, because it made you very, very vulnerable to pirates. So actually, by being slightly inland, you had better kind of defences against it. So that kind of makes sense. So you had your place of getting into your boats and going out and doing your exploring, your fishing and so forth. But actually your settlement, your valuables, your church, a little bit inland. That just made good sense, because otherwise you could be very, very vulnerable. So we think it was sort of fully settled about 1000 AD. So, with the millennium, didn't we? What, God, no, it can't be 25 years next year. Mike, where did that time go? 25 years. Anyway, so think the previous millennium, like 1000 AD. That's when the Norsemen were kind of settled here. And we think that this was kind of a thriving kind of community. But that by 1069, we're going to talk about it again, as ever, William the Conqueror, Harrying of the North, you remember? He'd smashed the Vikings at York, he got them out, and now he's going to basically lay Yorkshire low, particularly North Yorkshire, to stop it being a place of habitation and reconquest by the Vikings. So consequently, this gets done for in the Harrying of the North in 1069. So we're up at the top, and this is pretty cool. Like an opening movie, fantastic. So this, by the way, is a sea mine from the Second World War. That they used to illustrate in coming. Not so much this though, because this, of course, was what they put all around. During the war for a long time, we were very up against it, with the potential, obviously, of a German invasion, the forces and so forth. So consequently, the coastline had mines all the way around to kind of protect us against kind of big ships kind of coming in. And this one of them, you just see the size of it. You think, packed up with explosives, that was going to be a pretty big bomb. But now it has a collection point, look, and it says here, if you can read that, this old Second World War mine placed here as a collecting box. Your donation will help us support dependents of those lost at sea, as well as sick, disabled and retired fishermen and mariners in need. And that's my sort of first story that I want to tell you, is precisely about that. Because this is called, if you see here, the Shipwrecked Mariners Society. And shipwrecks, as you can imagine, have been kind of part and parcel of this kind of landscape. But there's a particular story that happened that I think is really quite incredible. And I just want to tell you about it, because this is about a brig, a type of boat that was named the Visitor. And it ran aground in Robin Hood's Bay on the 18th of January 1881. It was a violent storm. So think about the storm on the night that the Demeter, ran aground at the pier head in Whitby. A similar kind of night in 1881, a violent storm. And in order to save the crew, the lifeboat from Whitby was pulled. It couldn't sail round because of the storm. So instead, they went over the top. Over that headland over there, Whitby is 6 miles away. And so they pulled the lifeboat overland. 18 horses pulled this, and men. through 7 feet deep snowdrifts. And there was 200 men involved in this rescue, clearing the snow. And they cleared the snow all the way down to the bottom of the village. Okay? And, you know, obviously there's all these awkward kind of bends, and the men had to demolish garden walls, uproot bushes, and make way for the lifeboat carriage. It was launched only 2 hours. Isn't that incredible? Community activity. 2 hours it took them to get 6 miles overland with a lifeboat. But they got to the crew of the Visitor, and they rescued it on the 2nd attempt. And there's a plaque over here, which I think is a brilliant, brilliant story. Not only of human endeavour and of courage and determination, but I think as well just showing how these communities kind of came together, because these guys that would have been manning the lifeboat would have been sailors, they would have been fishermen for the local kind of community. And, you know, it is absolutely, you know, this survival by coming together. So here we are at the 18th of January 1881, the brig Visitor ran ashore. You want to take a photo of that, those who want to read it. So future generations may remember the bravery of coxswain Henry Freeman and the dogged determination of the people of Whitby, Haskell and Robin Hood's Bay who overcame such difficulties. And so they put in this memorial in 1981. But isn't that just amazing? Heroes, Elizabeth says, I'm completely in agreement. Absolute heroes. But it's that self-sufficiency, isn't it? There's nobody else who's going to come to your assistance. There's no magic bullet. If you're going to save those lives, we are going to have to get and manhandle that lifeboat over that cliff through 7 feet of snow. And you go, fine, let's do it. I think that shows you the measure of the people that were living here, right? Isn't it a great story? And there's also, of course, as you can imagine, some great characters in history. Now, it's said, because we're just walking, the old railway line just runs behind us, and there's a lovely story, a ghost story actually, about Headless Bert. I don't know if you've heard of Headless Bert. He said to haunt this area behind us on this coastal path running along the kind of headland up here. So, you know, Yorkshire's farmers are known as being a bit frugal. Some would say tight, some might even say mean-spirited. But few were as kind of precious with the pennies as Bert Marshall was. It's even said that Bert Marshall stole his dentures from a corpse. Now, I think there's careful with money, and then there is downright odd. I think taking your dentures from a corpse, that's definitely on the downright peculiar sort of side of things. I'll just wait for these guys to come and then we'll start walking down. So that's kind of Bert Marshall. And the only thing kind of Bert cared about, the only money he spent was spending money on alcohol, right? And every Friday, he'd walk along the route of the Whitby to Scarborough railway line. And he walked to the Windmill Inn, which was kind of 5 miles in both directions. And he did this every Friday night. And then when he got there, he'd get steaming drunk. This was his kind of weekly thing. He'd put his false teeth in, but he wouldn't bother with it the rest of the week. And then he'd walk to the pub 5 miles. Anyway, he'd get steaming drunk. And one evening, he begins his walk back on the railway line. And it said that something, we don't know what, maybe it was the Barghest, who knows, of Whitby, knocked him over, and they knocked out his dentures. And of course, you know, he's got these dentures robbed off a corpse, but that's not a reason, you know, not to want them back. So he's on his hands and his knees trying to look for him, and apparently he topples over, knocks himself out, and he's asleep on the railway line. And unfortunately, as he lies there unconscious, this kind of drunk guy, a train comes along and it chops his head off. So at this time, a lot of people believed it was incredibly important to be kind of buried, you know, entire, the whole body. Otherwise the spirit couldn't rest. But the trouble was they couldn't find his head. It had been crushed by a locomotive. And it's said that Bert is still restless. He walks up and down, particularly late on a Friday evening, particularly on moonless nights, along the train tracks. It's said he's still carrying his false teeth that have fallen out, you see. You can hear his teeth chattering in his hands, his headless corpse. Walks unrest for all of eternity, searching for his head. So there you go. If you're around here On a night, yeah, the clattering of false teeth is obviously headless bird up to his tricks. So there we go. So let's go and have a look. We'll get another view over, and hopefully the signal is behaving itself, and we will be done. So yeah, as I was saying, the rail track, which obviously connected Scarborough and Whitby, is totally gone now. There's now the cinder track, which is sorry, B.J. Williams song. So the cinder track is great actually. You can kind of walk down now between Scarborough and Whitby. So if you're staying in this kind of part of the world, it's great for bikes riding, for walking, and so forth. And just, you know, it's been brought back in. But I think it's a terrible pity that the train has gone, not least for Whitby, because Whitby's connections to public transport is pretty lousy. You can only go by train really up to Middlesbrough and then kind of down to York from there. It seems silly to me, but there we go. But at least there is a kind of utility now that's kind of being used, so for walking, for cycling. But look at this, our kind of first glimpse of the, look at these, higgles and piggles. Don't we just love a set of chimneys overlooking the sea as the sun begins to kind of come down on a day. Isn't that such a cute view? So lovely. I'll just try and see if I don't know what's down here, but we'll just have a look and just see what you can see. And just start to get a sense of the charm of this place, really. I mean, that's the word that I think you're going to use over and over to describe it, is, and everything is tucked away at the end of an alleyway. And there we are. We've got another view down then onto the foreshore. How lovely is that beautiful colour, isn't it? You've got a really lovely colour palette going on. And in some respects, that mist actually softening, it's making it rather nice, isn't it? It's almost like, you know, that look. I think that's absolutely glorious. So let's sort of go back up to start going back down again. And as we go down, you know, do just bear in mind, just imagine those guys having to kind of clear out the passages, the walls, the bushes, the plants, or the various unidentified impediments on their way down with the lifeboat. So there's a nice view on here, which is lovely to see. So the name. People often ask, where's the name come from? What's linked to Robin Hood? It's a great question, of course. And the first thing to say, by the way, is locals around here historically have always called it Baytown. That Robin Hood's Bay is a kind of a nickname, really, or perhaps Baytown's nickname. But anyway, it's a very widely used kind of nickname. So there is nothing to suggest that Robin Hood had anything to do with the name of this town, or of course even that he is a real person. Dawn, you'd imagine right, the house prices reflect the beauty and of course the scarcity of them. You know, there's only so many houses here, so consequently, if you want to live here, you gotta suck it up with the price you pay. So there is a legend that some people believe that Robin Hood had a run-in with French pirates here, who'd come to pillage the fishermen's boats and the northeast coast. It's said that the pirates surrendered Robin Hood, and he returned the loot to the poor people in the village. So of course that could be a source of the name, but almost you sort of stuck in a situation whereby because people love the name, they're going to want to associate Robin Hood with it, because obviously that just adds, you know, additional kind of points of delight, as you might say, onto it. So you don't read too much into it. There's often lots of numbers. So there's kind of many legends really about the Robin Hood's Bay name. One suggests the name came from the term for an ancient forest spirit, whereas another believes Robin Hood kept boats by the harbour in Robin Hood's Bay in case he needed to make a quick escape. So this was his way back out to the continent across the sea. Love the alleyways as well. There's another story suggests the Abbot of Whitby asked Robin Hood to repel an attack by Danish raiders. Well, if that was the case, it wasn't successful, was it? Because we know this became a hangout, really, settlement of Norsemen of the Vikings. So if that was the case, the abbot must have been sorely disappointed with Robin Hood, and it's surprising then he wouldn't bother to name it after somebody had apparently failed in his task. But there we go. This is the problem with legends, you'll never know. So lots of debate about the origins of the Robin Hood story. And many individuals, have been suggested to be the inspiration for the name. It's also believed, though, that the name Robin Hood is a kind of stock name, as you might say. A robber in a hood. A robber in hood. You see how that kind of might come together? Robin Hood, Robin Hood. So consequently, a Robin Hood could have been anybody, couldn't it? So it just goes to show that we talk about Robin Hood as one person, but actually, if indeed he existed, which he may well have done, he could be, 10, 15 different people. Yeah, lovely, the bench there, Robin Hood's Bay. So we really don't know. So so it could be Thieves' Bay. We could really be calling it Thieves' Bay in Robin Hood's Bay. So what we do know is that the first evidence of the name comes from a period that's been the closest they can get to it is somewhere between 1322 and 1346. There's a letter to a French aristocrat from Louis, the Count of Flanders, to Edward III, pleading for the return of his ship, which was taken to Robin Hood Bay by the people of England. So perhaps this is going to first reference to piracy as well in the bay. But isn't it just... I just want you to take you down slowly because I'm going to savour this pleasure, but everywhere is just Thieves' Bay. It's very exciting. It always sounds like something out of a Terry Pratchett, doesn't it, or something, In fact, you could definitely see this as being a sort of, in Terry Pratchett world, it's definitely got this this kind of feel for it. Everything on the slope. And as you can see there, it's a wonderful attempt over here, I think in vain, because it still slopes like you wouldn't believe, to make that bench be something like level by putting the block under there. But I would say it's not really level, is it, that bench? It is still most definitely on the slope. But they're doing there. Look at the light at the bottom there. It's looking absolutely beautiful. And we'll perhaps try and get to Staithes this year as well. I don't know what the 4G's like there. We're going to do a test soon at Staithes, and Runswick Bay, and Saltburn, and Sands End, and all those places. So I say, if the signal drops a bit, don't worry, we'll soon pick it back up again. So fishing and farming were the kind of the original occupations. Oh, I want to go rummage there. Not great. Spend some time there. So yeah, fishing and farming were the original occupations, followed by many of the bay folk. And many houses were built here between 1650 and 1750. So the answer to your question that you're probably asking is, how old are these houses, these cottages? And some of them, are just tidgy. Look at this one down here. The signal may drop, but I'll just do my best to bring it to you. But just look how comically small this little house is here at the end. It is just delightful. It's like a doll's house. You see? That is absolutely tiny. And that is like literally one room at the top. You see this, Tracy? It's literally one room at the top and one room at the bottom. It's absolutely delightful. So, it's adorable, absolutely. You actually hit the nail on the head there. But as I say, not roomy. You wouldn't accuse these of being roomy. Now these, a little bit better. They definitely worked out the tiny house movement here. What's this? Is this Clematis? Yep. Or is it Jasmine? Clematis Montana. Clematis Montana, says Mrs. John. It's always good. So, who could cope with a house like that? Have we got any kind of devotees of tiny houses? Hey. Do you see how small it's got? Walk up now. Look, it's literally one room up above. Just you and Humphrey. He'd still be in the way. Perfect one, but his false teeth. Wouldn't it just? Yeah. Keep your false teeth upstairs. Clematis Montana. Thank you very much, Tish. So you've got to bear in mind that these are homes that would be entire families in them. So as I say, just like cute as a button, without a doubt. Don't get me wrong. You just, forget it. This is the place. You want to come. But it's delightfully bijou. I think that's the word, isn't it? To stay, but obviously fine for a few days. But imagine your entire life has to be lived in these kind of dimensions, and you'd see that it's a wee bit of a challenge. So, I say most of them were involved in fishing, and most families owned or part-owned cobles. I'll just give you a picture if I can just find a coble for you. Oops. This is so this is a coble here. This is actually in Whitby. Frank Meadows Sutcliffe, our favourite photographer. So the small wooden boats at the front there, they are cobles. So they are that's your kind of your day-to-day, your bog standard boat that people would have. I've actually got a family with a coble. This is actually in Robin Hood's Bay itself. So that's the Storm family. Isn't that a wonderful picture? That's the headland we were looking at a minute ago. It's taken by Frank Meadows Sutcliffe. Isn't that absolutely beautiful? And you can see there the shellfish. So they've been kind of scouring, bringing in foods from the sea. So that's a coble. So that was the kind of typical sort of fishing vessel that people would have. So I'll just take those off.
The boy has just come down here on his bike. He must have been going about 60 minutes.
Okay. So obviously later some folk would own kind of ocean-going craft, but for the most part they didn't. They would stay closer in to the shore. Very few people would have had the resources to have sort of ocean-going vessels or places to kind of store them. So fishing kind of reached its peak in the mid-19th century, with fishermen using the coble for line fishing. So literally just regular style fishing in winter, and the larger boats are herring fishing. And the fish then loaded into panniers, and men and women walked or rowed over the moorland tracks. So they'd be carried across to the markets at Pickering or York. So very much a kind of manual endeavour, human powered. I mean, you might be able to have, a horse, perhaps a donkey to help you carry these, but I mean, it was very much based on kind of human labour. And of course, the men and the women sort of doing this sort of together. Often women kind of mending nets, gutting, filleting, preparing fish and so forth. So everybody in the family, the children. The doors, funny if you mention that, Tish, the doors are really interesting here. They are kind of very distinctive, lovely, different colours, neither 4 or sort of 6 pane, but they've all got a very distinctive style. It's kind of referred to as kind of definitely a feature of Robin Hood's Bay. And there's some lovely bits of ironwork. If I see some kind of nice ironwork, I will show you. And they're absolutely delightful, aren't they? But they've all got a very, very kind of distinct look, have these doors. So you can imagine, carrying all those fish onto your sketch rose cottage. Oh, so here's Catherine. So we'll just get a picture of there for Catherine. So Catherine was here, not so long back, and she sketched. So again, just look at the size as those sort of folk go past. It gives you a sort of sense, really, of kind of the actual size and how small that cottage is. Again, it's essentially one room below, one room above, perhaps a little toilet room, a little kitchen out the back, but very, very modest sort of accommodation. And bearing in mind as well, you've got people, as I say, that needed to keep nets and kittens over. So an awful lot of the time, people would actually be down at the harbour front, and that's where all the kind of fishing gear would obviously be stored. So people living very, very close to their workplaces. I'm probably sort of pushing my luck here in terms of signal. In fact, I definitely will be. But I'm going to try it anyway, just to see if I can if we can just go down this alleyway here, because again, you just kind of melt with how cute it is. Because I can't really kind of think of anywhere else where you've got such a kind of extensive network of alleys. Just walk through. You can go round. Isn't that fabulous? So should we go and look at the wisteria? Apologies if the signal is I can't continuing. But have an eye back up. I'll do a little bit of filming I can share with you as well, because it is just so cute. I love it. So you've got almost every inch really of space here is being utilised and has kind of been, kind of developed. First of all, the alley. Oh dear. Of the kind of mindset that this is a kind of a county and national asset to be. It's beautiful. So I know that this in just a moment or two, it will open up back. So we've got a moment or two, it will open up back. So we've got about to work its way down now to decline. Life of fishermen actually was very risky. So lots of superstition around the sea. So in particular, a boat would not be launched if the fisherman or woman if the fisherman met a woman or a pig on the slipway. This was considered very, very unlucky. Seagulls, it was believed, said to be the souls of drowned sailors. So a bit of a kind of what's called like reincarnation, right? So if a seagull, the families inside considered it a symbol of death. So consequently, people were very, very, anxious at the sight of seagulls, which is bad news by the sea. But actually, there's also threats that weren't just about superstition, that were about a kind of very real threat, and that is the press gangs of the late 18th and early 19th century. Have you heard of the press gangs? So the press gangs were basically the way that the Navy recruited. And look at this doggy up here, that's fantastic. And it was all rather underhand. The press gangs were feared and hated because what they were basically doing was pressing men into service in the King's Navy, to the Royal Navy. And often they used very, very underhand techniques, in particular getting men that were drunk in pubs to what they called take the king's shilling, which is to accept the king's pay. But the way they would do this is surreptitiously put a coin, it said, into the drinking vessel of the drunk man. So when he then took a glass to the king's shilling and was then pressed, which usually meant being a period of years, it can't get out of it. So people were very, very kind of scared. People were fishermen were supposedly meant to be exempt, but in reality, they often weren't that picky. It was very, very different, very, very difficult, obviously, to get people into the Navy. So, this tricking of drunks often would happen to fishermen. So I've got a picture here, sort of contemporary, which people were really kind of scared and alarmed, really, at the behaviour of the press gangs. It's kind of a national sort of scandal, but for many, many years, it sort of persisted. So let's get rid of try and get that picture a bit big. So we just say when we bring these little pictures up. There we go. So you can see there, well, by a pub, I think, the Griffin, he's being pulled out, and there you see the sailors there. So yeah, check, like they say now today, check your drinks, put something on top of your drink, right? There's nothing kind of new in that, that was certainly the case back in the day as well. So a very kind of real threat to people were the press gangs. And village women would look out for them, and they beat drums to warn the menfolk that press gangs, they were very much, the men were there to kind of, help to feed, protect their families, and they weren't going to see them pressed into service for the King's Navy to go and die in some foreign war when they should be there, helping to provide for and be at the centre of the family. So press gangs were very much a factor of life. So we're coming into the harbour area now. So we've talked about the orthodox kind of trades, which are obviously fishing and farming. We've talked about the trades you might fall into by accident, being a sailor in the Navy and pressed into it. But of course, the trade, or the free trade, should we put it that way, that is most closely associated with this part of the world is smuggling, which of course is the free trade in luxury goods. And it was a huge, huge, huge problem in 18th century society. Just to show you over here, there's a fantastic dinosaur, fantastic, I love that. So in essence, smuggling was basically a way of getting luxury goods without paying the import duty on them. So you're not paying the taxes that are coming on them. And the governments, of course, were spending huge amounts of wars on the wars of Europe, Napoleon and so forth. So consequently, for the governments, import duty was a very valuable source of revenue. Of course, so like a double whammy. Not only might your husband be pressed into the Napoleonic Wars in the Navy, you've then got to pay more for basics like a cup of tea. This is not necessarily very top-end luxury goods, but anything basically that today perhaps we might say is VATable, you pay VAT on it. In those is the import duty to push up the price. So In a similar way, so the smugglers basically provide access to the goods which otherwise were unavailable to the villagers. And in the 18th century, Robin Hood's Bay, on the Yorkshire coast, it's kind of natural isolation, protected by marshy moorland on three sides. As you know, we kind of come down to the bottom. Offers a kind of natural aid to this well-organised business, which, despite its dangers, must have paid a hell of a lot better than fishing alone. So smuggling at sea was backed up by many on the land who were willing to finance and transport the contraband. And it's said that fisherfolk, farmers, clergy and gentry alike were all involved. There was often fierce battles ensued between the smugglers and excisemen, both at sea and on land. And also the bay wives were known to pour boiling water on excisemen from the bedroom windows in the narrow alleyways. So women actively involved again in the moving of goods. The housewives of the town would go to market wearing loose-fitting garments and return with garments, kind of buttons bustling, having stuffed their clothes with contraband goods. This is wonderful. This is old Brook one too. So Mrs. Gaskell, the author, lived in Whitby for some time, said the very clever way in which certain Whitby women managed to bring in prohibited goods, how in fact when a woman did give her mind to smuggling, she was more full of resources and tricks and impudence and energy than any man. So hiding places, bolt holes and secret passages abounded in this town. It is said that a bale of silk could be unloaded from the boats and transported from the bottom of the bay to the top of the hill and out onto the moors without ever seeing daylight. Because in essence, when we look at these narrow winding streets and the mishmash of tightly packed houses, it's very, very easy for us to understand why. The duty. And the modus operandi of the local smugglers in the 18th century was to hover off the coast in large ships, which was illegal activity, and send signals to the land. They then set sail out in the small boats, known as the cobbles, to pick up the contraband goods. And we know that in 1773, two excise cutters, the Mermaid and the Eagle, were outgunned and chased out of the bay by three smuggling vessels, a schooner and two shallops. And a pitched battle between the smugglers and the excisemen took place in the dock, and over 200 casks of brandy and Geneva, gin that is, and 15 bags of tea were taken. It was in 1779. It said that those taking part in the smuggling were classed as outlaws, but in reality smugglers were often looked upon by locals and their communities very, very favourably. After all, they're just providing a source of cheap and luxurious goods, silk, spirits, tobacco and tea, without troubling the exciseman and their apparently unjust taxation measures. And it's well known there's a subterranean network of tunnels. And again, I'm not going to walk too far into this, not least because, I've got to be honest, it is pretty stinky. But this opening here is one of the smuggling tunnels. And there's these smugglers' holes that are dug out underneath everybody's floorboards. And what happens is for those that have gone up and used video camera and so forth, is they get narrower and narrower, these tunnels. But then it gets to a stage where you can hand them on, literally by people moving things under their floorboards from one house to another. And underneath the Fisherman's Arms here on the bay, which dates back to 1780, this was the epicentre of the smuggling. And we know that in the autumn night in 1779, revenue officers fell asleep in the cellar after sampling the proceeds of a raided smugglers' haul of gin and brandy they were meant to be guarding. So they're meant to be guarding brandy and gin. Instead they get rotten drunk, they fall asleep, and he said that when the locals found out, they alerted the local smuggling gang, who came and stole the contraband back. It's a rather embarrassing end, as the officers woke up to go and find their cargo was all gone. So I say this is what they call King's Beck Tunnel. Just here, it's flowing out onto the, give us a wave on the dot cam. Where's the dot cam? And there's a series of tunnels kind of leading off this main drain, and you've got wooden timbers visible at the top that are the floorboards of the properties above. The pub here, the Bay Hotel, of course, was again absolutely the epicenter of the smuggling trade. So once the goods have been kind of safely stowed, of course, they're needed to be sold. And this is where the kind of the greatest threat of being caught existed. But it's not actually that simple to catch smugglers, particularly when they had the support and the discretion of local villagers. So ladies would smuggle silk around their waist, and it said even carried animal bladders full of alcohol under their skirts. And this way they could pass goods along trading networks right the way across the moors. In salting fish was often used as a cover-up of trade of smuggled goods, because obviously the top layer is salted fish, underneath there you've got kind of contraband. So although kind of smuggling has long since died out in Robin Hood's Bay, the remnants are kind of still there in the fabrics of the buildings, in the stories. Look at a presentation, wherever you go on any kind of tourism site at Robin Hood's Bay, it talks about the smugglers. It's a kind of past that they are very, very kind of keen to embrace. There's Rudyard Kipling wrote a smuggler's songs, which paints quite a kind of picture of smuggling in the late 18th century. It goes, 25 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk. Them ask no questions, isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. Which I think really kind of sums up this idea of kind of just turning a blind eye, letting it go by. Everybody knows it's going on, making an absolute devil of a job for the authorities to kind of clamp down upon it. The old Coast Guard station, just over here on our left-hand side. So eventually, a Coast Guard station was brought in, as we know it wasn't there for the visitor, but this was, of course, a prime location for catching smugglers on the slipway, and there'd been a public house there, but so they knocked the public house down because they believed it was too associated with this rotten crime, and instead put the Coast Guard station over by the National Trust. It's a holiday cottage, a visitor centre, well, I'll show you when we go back up. We'll sort of finish up. There is a collection box out there which is said to be the oldest in the country, the fish. But just before we wrap up, the sea is a long, long way out. But let's just take a minute just to walk out a little bit and hopefully just give you a sense of the bay. So by the way, the sea wall here was built, I think, in the 1970s to protect against erosion. Again, if I take a picture, this was Francis Frith, and show you what this looked like before. I think it's that one. Sorry, can't get to it. Oh. So that's before, obviously, this big concrete seawall was put in. It's a famous Victorian photographer, Francis Frith. I think this is just at the turn of the century, around 1901, this photograph was taken. But as I say, when we go back off there, you can see that seawall is in place to protect basically from erosion. So that is kind of very much a feature. But isn't it just fantastic? So the last train, by the way, I just found my notes here, was 1964, I thought it was. So the last train that left from Baytown departed, and the tracks were ripped up. But now, of course, you've got the cinder track, which provides this fantastic route between Scarborough and Whitby, which is absolutely wonderful. Great way to view the coast. But isn't it just delightful? And of course, we've now got this being very, very low tide, so I can just bring you in and we can look at how beautiful and clear the water is here. Isn't it lovely? Yeah, it's not a moral tale. I mean, as I say, it's interesting, not a moral tale. I mean, I don't think they're at all set out to be. I think they embrace it. You know, a bit like, you know, a lot of places embrace, don't they? Their kind of their backstory, their history of being a bit lawless. The Wild West, I suppose, is the most famous of them all, isn't it? You know, of kind of the wildest frontiersmen, or you know, the backwoodsmen and so forth. You know, the people who usually lived in fairly isolated places and grew up their own kind of own culture and their kind of own value systems, and then actually authority was the outsiders. and they were trying to come in and repress and usually kind of hold back and kind of create, make life more difficult, charge them more, tax them, restrict them, and so forth. So I actually think there's a kind of grand tradition, in our history, of kind of rebelliousness, and that in these places where you've got, a sort of fair distance, if you like, to authority, it's much more likely to be apparent, and the local lawman around here a lot more powerful than any national agency is ever going to be. So you can see Mrs. John in the distance here. It's a heck of a long way, but you see these beautiful stones, so you can see how easy it would be, how low these stones are for schooners and vehicles to run aground here. Incredibly kind of treacherous foreshore, that's obviously exposed here at very low tide. So this, you really do need, of course, local pilots, so as in people that are skilled at navigating this area. There is some sand up at the top, but for the most part we're walking on rocks, kind of rock pools and tidal pools. Mitzi, I love them too. It's absolutely fantastic. And again, we've got I'll just come and try and give you a little bit of a close-up. It's really nice and clean. I can't see, unfortunately, any life. I was wondering, we might see a little crab or some such thing. Can't see anything just as yet. Yeah, I'm the same like Jamaica, and it's that kind of vibe as well, isn't it? That kind of everything, on these dark moonless nights, smuggling. And of course, we talked about on the Whitby tours as well, they were very, very happy to believe in supernatural and ghosts, because if you left them alone in graveyards, there was a place where they could bury goods, wasn't it? That a recently buried body may not just have a body, they may have other things that then men come out on dark nights, of course, to exhume at a later date. And of course this sort of gives succour, doesn't it, do you know what I mean, to stories and ideas then about activity in graveyards and noises and movements in the dark of night. So you can kind of see actually how it's in the interests of the smugglers to allow these kind of stories to kind of permeate the imagination as well as kind of societies, you might say, because it basically gave them more of a free rein to get on and do what they wanted. So isn't it wonderful though? But it's incredible. Cornwall, it's the same thing, Delost. So when you look at the rugged coast, I mean, this is, as I say, if you look at how you just run aground here, but in Cornwall it's full of jagged rocks. That actually the danger in Cornwall is high tide. It's not low tide, because it covers them over. But it's so easy to come on these jagged rocks that just rip a hole in the stern of a boat, and you're down. So consequently, there are many, many shipwrecks, and before ever the authorities would have been aware, the community would have been aware, and they'd be wanting to know, right, what's the cargo? So it's not something. Look at this, completely different. Look, out of position. Look at the colour of this. We just walked across half a mile of the same, looks to be carboniferous stone, and then suddenly, look at that, isn't that beautiful? Dropped from the sky. How did that get there? How did that get there? Are you feeling cold, Mrs. John? Or just inspired? Just digging Yorkshire. So there's light just catching beautifully now. Invigorated, says Mrs. John. I completely agree. Let's go, and we'll get a bit slippy now. It's still a bit wetter, and I'm going to try and get just up to the shore, so we can say that we've seen the sea. And then I think we're going to wrap it up. We've got 8 o'clock, so I'm going to do a little bit of filming in this light after we go down to try and capture the rest of the town for you and share that with you on a future date. The ghost put it there. I think you're absolutely right. So look at that light coming now. I'll just look at that. Isn't that something? So thank you everybody. It's an absolute joy. I'm sorry there's been some signal interruptions, but as I say, on the way back up I am going to do a bit of additional filming as this sun is going down, and I'll share that with you. And just thought I'd finish up by the water here. This is John with me, watching the sun going down, and isn't that absolutely... Are we going to fish and chips?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, yeah. Fish chips is booked in. Yeah, that's kind of factored in. So thank you everybody for your contributions. That I'm sure you will, as ever, be generous, support our journey, petrol time, and some fish chips on the way home. I'm really glad to have brought you here. As I say, sorry, occasional single dips, but I think you can sort of see why it's worth putting up with, you know, a few frustration for a few minutes to get the whole kind of package. So I'll just
Careful, it's slippery.
show me. Just on there, you're back to with the sun behind you. There you're in beautiful silhouette there.
I've got beach hair.
You got beach hair. It's no bad thing. So thank you everybody. I'll just spin the camera around. Give you a little wave from Robin Hood's Bay. And tomorrow we are out on the walls. We're back in HD, so 1080 tomorrow in York, and we're going to have a look for the first time at the removed bridge from above. So thank you, Fran. We're going to enjoy that. So I'm going to get out my camera now. We're going to walk back filming and get to the top, have some fish and chips, and
Good luck with the walk back.
then get home. So thank you everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. Robin Hood's Bay. We'll see you again tomorrow, hopefully. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
And goodbye.